episode of These Go to 11. Let's turn it up. Hey everybody, welcome back to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. This not only helps us to get our content out there, but also helps us to find out what you, our faithful listeners, think. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me as always, Greg Dutcher. Greg, what's going on, man?
Dude, did you like it how ready I was for this morning's podcast? Did you enjoy when you pulled up and how I was there waiting for you? Because I live about 3 minutes from our studio and you live 35
something like
40 minutes from the studio. So it was nice this morning to get a text from Nathan. I'll speak to the audience here directly. I'm sitting there working on some things, and I am, I'll just say, not properly attired for public interaction. And I got my laptop open. I'm kind of half awake. I'm plowing through some student stuff. And then get the text from Nathan, hey, you here? Oh, no. So, dude, as I told you, I forgot about that as quickly as we talked about it just days ago. But Nathan, you were gracious to me.
Hey, dude, you brought me breakfast. So
I know.
No complaints here.
And, dude, I loved your slight kind of the message Eugene Peterson paraphrase to food covers a multitude of sins.
That's right.
It does, my friend. It does. Yeah, sorry for the rough start, dude, but I'm fired up to be here now. It's nice, though, when your friend travels 40 minutes and I'm like, dude, forgot. But what I'm really glad at, dude, is that you know me. I can sometimes double book.
Yeah.
What if you, text me and I'm in a meeting for the next 2 hours or something. So today was very easy.
Well, and again, like you said, you're 3 minutes away, so it's not like,
it wasn't too hard, dude. But I did get a little more cleaned up since I was at the Orioles game the night before. We recorded this, a loss, sadly. And you just feel scuzzy.
Yeah.
Because it was actually a pretty good crowd there. And I just thought, I need to clean up a little bit. So I have. And dude, I'm surprised that our intro music wasn't Beyonce, All the Single Ladies.
That, of course, dude, consummate professional right there.
Yeah, you got to be a professional to pull that off.
That's right. So yes, we are in our series talking about relationships. Today is the first in the series, and we are going to dedicate today to the singles out there.
Yes.
Relationship of singles.
Yes.
This is a group of people who have been marginalized in society, it's odd that they've been marginalized in society with all the talks of equality and equal rights and, how you don't need to have another significant person in order to be important. And yet this seems to happen over and over again in society. And this, unfortunately, can happen in the church as well.
It can, dude. It can. And you said something, Nathan. I'll dispense with my joke because it's just like an OCD thing. I have to get it out. I was going to say, oh, my word, we're talking about people. I thought we were talking about cheese. The old Kraft singles with cheese. Love those, dude. Sometimes I would snack on those. Isn't that the fattest, most pathetic thing you've ever heard? Go to the fridge, take out 2 Kraft singles with cheese in plastic, and eat them. Not on a sandwich. I haven't done that in a long time. But anyway, okay, enough of that. You said something. You tell I'm still waking up. You said something when we were just having our breakfast there a little while ago, Nathan, that was good, that I hadn't thought of in a long time. And I wonder how many people in our audience have had this experience if they are single, when they were single, if their friends or family members have it. My wife, having been a nurse for several years, said this would happen a lot. It was your example of oh, hey, I mean, do you mind working this shift? Do you mind being the one to stay late? Do you mind doing the one because you're single?
Yeah.
You don't have a family. Sometimes that's spoken explicitly.
Right.
Like it's just the most normal thing to say. Probably more often than not, it's implicit.
Yeah.
But I've talked to single people that feel that.
Yeah. That pressure and
Yeah, it really is. And I'm sure you've heard things, Nathan, like I have. Sometimes it just seems, life is geared towards the plurality, not the single.
Yeah.
Right? A restaurant arrangement, seating arrangements.
Yes.
It's just, I mean, even the other day, dude, we were at Horizon Cinemas, and I understand it, but they're pretty much kind of a 2 reclining seats together, separated, right? I don't see too many theaters where you have 1 reclining seat, a barrier, another reclining seat, a barrier. It's things that you wouldn't notice, but are just kind of enshrined in our culture that often I think do make the single person feel, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And in the context of what we want to do today, we want to address that. We want to talk about the fact that while society, while at times the church might marginalize singleness, God does not.
Yes.
And there is a valuable place in society for the single. There is an important place in society for the single, and you are valued and appreciated more than you can know. And we want to address that and talk about that today. Next week, we will address and talk about marriage. We have a couple special guests coming on.
Yes, I'm excited, dude.
Yeah. It'll be good. And with that, we will have over 50 years combined marriage experience to talk about. So looking forward to that one. And then finally, we're going to finish up with relationships between parents and children, and then between parents, teachers, and children. And so that's going to be a 2-parter that we'll do. And we'll start with the parents and children. And then our final one will kind of wrap up going into the school year, talking about parents, teachers, and children. How do we interact within those relationships?
That will be a timely one, dude.
Yes.
Because end of the month, and although I do think public schools have finally settled. They've gone back and forth for years on what you have been doing right, dude.
Yeah.
In private school for many, many years. Post-Labor Day.
Yes.
So that'll drop the very end of the month. And I'm looking forward to that one, Nathan, because you as a teacher, done it a long time, who's worked with parents a long time.
Yes.
I would imagine have seen the highs and dare I say the lows.
Oh, yes.
Of what can happen with parents. So for me, honestly, I envision, I'll just forecast it now, dude, maybe playing a bit more of the interviewer.
Okay, yeah.
We can tackle that when we get there. But it's I feel like it's an opportunity to discover blind spots.
Yes.
Because I can think, having 4 kids, a teacher-parent email exchange, a face-to-face meeting.
Yeah.
I look forward to that.
Yeah. No, that's going to be a good one. But today we are talking about singles. And can I just say, starting off, as a form of encouragement, I want to be careful how I phrase this, because many a couple might be listening, and I could find myself in trouble quick. But singleness has a freedom to it that marriage and relationship does not.
Oh, there's no doubt.
The jokes that you hear, the old ball and chain tethered, being
I recommend that for an anniversary card.
That's right.
I know my wife would think that's hilarious. Keep going, dude.
But those are they're jokes for a reason, but there's some truth behind it, right? I mean, the fact is, I have to consult Joy when I'm making plans for things.
Of course.
I
Hopefully,
have to,
right?
right? I have to consider, has she made plans on our behalf for certain things, right? And if she's made plans, it's not that she hasn't told me, but have I remembered the plans that she's made?
Yeah.
So I'm not double booking or triple booking. And so there's a limitation in relationship. And I try to explain this to my students because oftentimes, they're teenagers and they're in this phase where they want to be with someone, they want to have those relationships. And it's like, okay, guys, I get it because I was there. But please understand that there are limitations and restrictions to a relationship. That being single is, especially at that young age, is more freeing. Because, you have a car, you have your license, and so you're not trying to consult with your boyfriend or girlfriend. You can just go. You can go do whatever you want. Your friends want to hang out on a Friday night. Hey, I don't have to talk to anybody. I can just go and hang out. I want to go to the gym and work out. I can just go to the gym and work out. I want to pick up an extra shift at work. I want to pick up an extra shift at work.
Yep.
I can do that. And you don't have to consult and think about another person's feelings when making those decisions.
Oh, of course. Of course, dude. There are enormous opportunities for single people. And that is not in any way, I know why you were being sensitive to discount. Usually, if a single person is wanting to be in a relationship, and let's just say it usually in the context of the church, it's a relationship that would lead to marriage, then that person, of course, will struggle with all sorts of things, but loneliness, often a feeling maybe of isolation. So I do think it is good to holistically think through. It's almost, it sounds a little too sterile to say it like this, but the pros and cons.
Yeah.
But there are pros and cons of everything. And, this gets into 1 Corinthians 7 when Paul talks about marriage and some of his commentary on marriage and divorce. It's a complex section because, at times he says, not I, but the Lord.
Yes.
And other times, not the Lord, but I, which has baffled interpreters. Does that mean I don't take this as seriously? How does this work with the doctrine of inspiration? But what most commentators will agree is he is definitely selling the benefits of singleness there insofar as it relates to ministry engagement.
Yes.
And it's the idea, as he says there in 1 Corinthians 7, that it needs context, and there is a context there, but he says the married man cares about the things of the world.
Yeah.
He does not mean world there in the 1 John 2:15, the world, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. He means literally what you said, dude, just those. When you're married, there's money matters.
Yeah.
There's time allocation matters. There's family matters. There's parenting matters. There's all sorts of logistics. That's what he's saying when he says the married man cares about the things of the world. Because I've had some people ask me, like, oh, does Paul view marriage as bad? I said, well, I doubt the same man who penned Ephesians 6.
Right.
Who gave us the picture of Christ and the church as the groom and the bride. I don't think Paul had a low view of marriage.
Right.
But if you understand he's addressing a particular issue there in 1 Corinthians 7, he's definitely addressing just the reality that the single person can commit himself or herself to ministry engagement with more abandon.
Yeah.
It's a fact. Dude, quick story here. There was a gentleman when I was 21, 22, shortly before I met Lisa. I was just finishing up college. I may have even been done college because I had a kind of a gap year between college and seminary. There was a man named Ed who was probably at the time in his mid to late 70s. He was a single his whole life, never married.
Yeah.
And he showed a real interest in me because he knew I was an aspiring seminarian and all this, and was a good man. he had me work. He was kind of an old school church guy. He was on the board of the Baltimore Sunday School Convention, which I don't think is a thing anymore necessarily.
Right.
So I would help him with things. And interestingly enough, dude, he got pneumonia.
Okay.
And, it was pretty bad. He didn't have to be hospitalized, but he needed help. And, dude, obviously, here's a man in his 70s who was never married.
Yep.
He had friends in his church.
Yep.
But he needed help.
Yeah.
Because he was homebound. He needed trips to the pharmacy, trips to the grocery store, needed some basic things done around the house, needed some things mailed because this is like the early 90s and we're still writing paper checks and sending them in the mail with stamps and such. And dude, he asked me if I would help him. So I spent like pretty much a full week in there. I crashed on his couch.
Yep.
And I remember feeling kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been a caregiver. But I was.
Yeah.
And dude, I wasn't in a relationship.
Yep.
I was a single guy, and I was able to do something which I have to say was a pretty unlikely experience for me at that phase in life, but it was good.
Yeah.
Because I still think of it sometimes, dude, in later life situations when Lisa's mother was sick or other family members have been sick, and you're playing a role there.
Yeah.
I got a little basic training.
Yeah.
On wow, this is a lot.
Yeah.
So when somebody tells me they're the caregiver for a relative, just getting a taste of what that meant as a young single guy. But I remember, dude, not really appreciating it. It felt good to help somebody.
Sure.
But if I was a young married guy there, not that we wouldn't have, it would have been a totally different situation.
Yeah.
Because you have to balance everything.
Yes.
Well, did we have plans this weekend? Do we? Even if you change the plans to help, you're still changing plans that you have because you're married or with someone. So, the opportunities that a single person has for ministry engagement are special. And I don't want to be afraid to say that because Paul says it in 1 Corinthians 7. Yeah.
Well, and Joy and I are kind of in a in-between position, right? Obviously, neither of us are single. We're married to one another, but we don't have children. And so that takes away some of the responsibility of other pieces that a family might normally have. And I can even see that giving us a certain amount of freedom within our relationship to do things, right? I mean, we've talked about this. We spent an entire a full year, living with Joy's grandfather because we didn't have children. So once Joy's grandmother passed away, we were able to actually just move in with him so he didn't have to move somewhere else. He was in great mental shape and condition, but physically he needed a hand. He needed help. And so not having children, we were able to say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move in with him and spend that year with him doing that. We wouldn't have been able to have done that if we had children.
Yeah.
And so I can see if you bring that down even further to where, okay, the only person I have to contend with is myself and my schedule. The ability that one has to be able to do whatever they want and not consult someone is just it's mind-blowing to me and in a good way, right? I think oftentimes about the amount of work that I've put into the church here, right? Helping out with youth group at one point, doing community groups, you and I doing this podcast and all of the schedules that you and I have to coordinate between the two of us with our family and the things that are going on. It's a juggling act. To be able to just say, hey, it's 6:00 on a Tuesday. Why don't we come in and record a podcast? Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Dude, that's a great point. If we were two single guys, dude, we could do a lot more podcasts and bore a lot more people.
That's right.
Because can you imagine? But you're not kidding. It would be so easy, right? You just snap your fingers, and then it's just a question of. But so much of it is do you guys have a thing?
Right.
Family thing. Do I have a thing? Jobs, timing, all that. It's a lot. I will say this, dude. I remember at my former church, we had a widower who was retired and just wanted to do things and would say that all the time. I always felt like, did we ever find him enough? Just wanted to be of use.
Yeah.
And he would say all the time, listen, I'm not planning to marry again. I'm retired. All my needs are met. What do you need me to do?
Yeah.
Put me in play.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because that's sort of the ultimate. I mean, he's independent, not independently wealthy.
Sure.
But independently self-sufficient.
Yes.
And was not married, was not in a relationship. I mean, he had commitments that he would make voluntarily, right? Because he had kids and grandkids and maybe even great grandkids there at the end. So yeah, I think that's an important thing, dude, that we establish there is ministry engagement. Some of the darker side, dude, of this as it spills into the church, because I don't want to be afraid to say that.
Yeah.
I have had single people tell me, one, this is where there's a line. I never want as a church leader for the single person to think you should do more.
Yes.
In other words, I don't want to be the charge nurse telling the single nurse there, oh, you can take the holiday shifts.
Yes.
You're not married with kids or something. So there's a line. I want to encourage the person to look at their singleness, even if it's just a season, because God's going to bring somebody in their life this year, next year, 10 years, that while you have this season, there are opportunities. Like, I'm not saying I know how to do it perfectly, but I want to communicate that as an encouraging word without I'm watching.
Yeah.
How come you're not signed up? And I see this. So that I think church leaders are always trying to strike a balance.
Sure.
Hopefully there. I mean, I hope we don't. I mean, can you imagine an announcement? Hey, we need 10 people, and I'm expecting all you singles to do it.
Right. We have your names.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? Wow. I'm sure that would attract so many singles to the church.
Yeah.
They felt like that. And the other thing I hear sometimes, Nathan, is I also don't want to communicate that a single person is somehow in a state of deficiency.
Yes.
Right? Almost that, well, you're not really a full person.
Right.
Until you're with somebody.
Yeah.
Because one, and I will say it, that is not true. So please do not, I'm not saying it to you, Nathan, but I'm saying it to all of us.
Yeah.
Misapply the Genesis passage.
Right.
No, God said it is not good for man to be alone. Well, in its historical context, we have Adam, the first man, who is going to be the progenitor of the entire human race. So we get some context there, right? And yes, while marriage may be what we would call normative, and is, look, sociologically, anthropologically, you cannot deny, it is the preserving and perpetuating catalyst in a society.
Right.
We have more people because of marriage, etc. Nobody is denouncing that. But in that worldwide calculus, there are single people.
Right.
And I find nothing in Scripture that ever says, until you get married, you're not fully authentic.
Yeah.
But because I have heard some people preach Genesis 1 in such a way that I could see how a single person could, okay, it's not good. See, the Bible says it's not good. It's not good. And when you want to be with somebody, it can compound that person's grief.
Yes.
Instead of seeing in the providence of God.
Yes.
He's called you in this season.
Yeah.
And it might be a lifelong season.
Yeah.
Some people, some of my historical heroes, John Stott being one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
At some point, I think if memory serves, I think he said at some point in his 40s, he believed that God had called him to singleness. and kind of owned it. I'm almost certain somebody could fact check me on that. I feel like I heard that in an interview or a podcast where they were discussing Stott, and he lived well into his 80s, maybe even early 90s.
I think 90s, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was been around a long time. And he would be the example, and I know he spoke openly of the things he could do.
Yes.
The ministry commitments he was uniquely able to make.
Yeah.
Owned it, and I don't think anybody would say that knew John Stott, and I've heard many people testify about his influence, as a great British statesman and pastor and theologian and missionary and relief worker. He did so many things. I don't think anybody would say his life was it was sad.
Yeah.
Sad he never married.
Yeah.
He wasn't sad.
Right.
He believed that's what God called him to do.
Yes.
So,
well, and again, we should never make light of the fact that when God creates Eve for Adam, it is to create, yes, for the reproduction of the world and to keep going, but it's to be in community, right? It's the deficiency isn't, oh, it's sad that Adam doesn't have a wife.
Right.
It's sad that Adam doesn't have somebody who is like him.
Yes.
And that's what we need to remember about Genesis.
Very good.
Yes, God's killing two birds with one stone because, the world does need to be populated.
Of course.
But the sadness is in the fact that Adam is alone, that he doesn't share in that communal experience that God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit share in with one another.
Yes.
And so, being able to look at that and realize that if you are in community with others, then that is a fulfillment of what God has mandated.
And dude, think about that. That's a brilliant point. The ultimate proof of that is the eternal state. Marriage is not a permanent eternal state.
Yeah.
So how could it be tied into our authentic personhood?
Yes.
It is a blessing.
Yeah.
It is a gift.
Yep.
It brings great benefits to the couple, benefits to the world. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
No, I'm not in any way, for any couple that I'm marrying in the next year or two, if you're listening, I'm not in any way denigrating the beauty of marriage. But we go into the eternal state with exactly what you just said. We're in perfect harmony and community.
Yeah.
We're not lone rangers, but we're not married.
Right.
And Jesus is clear on that in the Gospels, right? That we are like the angels, neither marrying nor given in marriage.
Yeah.
So I always say, "Ooh, that's a tough one."
Right.
But let's be honest, it solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
What I call the Elizabeth Elliot issue, if anyone is aware of that wonderful woman who was married to Jim, I think the shortest amount of time.
Yep.
And Jim died as a martyr on the beaches of Ecuador in, 56, 58?
Yeah.
Somewhere thereabouts. Then she married another man who died, I think had a untimely death, cancer or something like that. And then the man she was married to the longest, and I forget his name, everybody just remembers Jim.
Right.
Died.
Yeah.
But she was married to him the longest amount of time. So you think, and you're like, oh, yeah, what would happen? Well, she didn't need to worry about that.
Right.
Because in the ultimate eternal state,
yes,
we're not married, but as you said, Nathan, we're in community.
Yeah.
And we are collectively, as it were, the bride. Christ is the bridegroom, and whatever beautiful things marriage accomplishes here.
Yeah.
It is short term.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
So I will try to encourage singles with that. Listen, I'm in no way minimizing the desire. I think it's a godly desire.
Sure.
To want to be with someone and build that lifelong relationship. I understand the grief associated with, I thought it was going to happen by now, but it hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yet to remind that person, ultimately, none of us are eternally, permanently married. Yeah. Now, couple comments on that, I still say. So finally, I get my perfect glorified body. and I'm not married.
Right.
I'll just leave it at that. So I'm assuming I'm not going to have the Dunlop disease, with the belly Dunlop's over my belt, to use the corniest phrase ever. Dude, the question is, will I have six-pack abs? Right now, I'm told I got more of a keg. So anyway, sorry, kind of went off the rails.
Right. No, but see, it's funny because again, when we look at marriage, and as you said, there's nothing wrong with that, right? This is a godly desire that we have. God has placed this within us. But when Paul gives us the description of marriage and reasons why we should get married,
yeah,
they're very temporal things, right? It's for the procreation of the world.
Yep.
That's one reason why marriage was given to humanity. Go in and, fill the world.
Yep.
It's for now this is interesting because you think if Adam and Eve had not sinned, this one wouldn't have necessarily been an issue, but to curb the lust of humanity, right?
Yep.
That these desires are in us, and marriage is given to us so that we can appropriately express those desires.
Yeah, Bible doesn't hide that either. Again, 1 Corinthians 7, it says it very bluntly, better to marry than to burn.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But with that too, we know that that sex is not a must in humanity, right? That we do not have to have sex like we have to have food and water.
Of course.
And so there's something in that's like, okay, so when kind of thinking through all of this, thinking through also reasonably, all right, can I control myself sexually? Yeah. Right? Is that something that I need fulfilled or that I'm struggling to, fulfill? So thinking through some of these things also gives us a perspective. I mean, in one sense, it's kind of like, getting married, that must have meant that I was a little weaker then.
Right.
Right. I mean, and again, I say that a little tongue in cheek and jokingly, but there is something in the way Paul portrays marriage that seems to suggest that this is given for a specific reason, and it's not a must. It's not a requirement.
Oh, of course. Well, I mean, when he says, "I wish all men were as I am," which again, one of the hardest biblical thorny issues in terms of New Testament studies is the marital status of Paul. I've read on that for years, dude. I've never really landed. I mean, the basic camps are that he was always single.
Yeah.
Or he was married and his wife has died by the time. It's pretty clear. It looks in 1 Corinthians 7 when he says, "I wish all men were as me," in the context of it's the married man cares about the things of the world.
Right.
Paul is saying, "Look at me. I'm not married."
Yeah.
So whether Paul was married and can write about marriage from a personal perspective too, that he understands it, he knows it. Some people think his wife maybe was killed in a sweeping persecution. Who knows?
Right.
We don't have to decide that today. There's a lot of associated issues with Paul's marital status, but he definitely lets us know of his personal desires, man.
Yeah.
I mean, now keep in mind the Apostle Paul, what is he driven by? Obviously the incredible, exhilarating prospect of the gospel continuing to go in all the world. So it's kind of his way of saying, oh man, if everybody was like this. Now, the other thing we could say, if everybody was like this, it would be interesting to see what happened to the church.
Right.
Because obviously the children of believers, it's a very important role.
Right.
We expect many of those children to become believers like their parents.
Yes.
And, build legacies and traditions and those sorts of things. But Paul clearly is not hiding his desire, man.
Yeah.
If I picture a perfect world, be everybody.
Right.
Single, free to be fully engaged in God's work, And understandably, it's a good thing. Sometimes, dude, historically, though, we have examples like John Wesley,
Yeah.
who had a miserable marriage,
Yeah.
whose wife wished her husband would die. And I will say this, having read 2 books now on John Wesley, what an inspiring gospel preacher.
Yeah.
Lousy husband.
Yeah.
You could argue John Wesley probably never should have gotten married,
Yeah.
because he got married and lived like he was single.
Yeah.
And hard to not. Why? Well, I want to take the gospel to the U.S. I want to take the gospel to England. Scott, I want to,
Right.
you've got the circuit riders, the guys on horseback that I think their average age was like 27, 28. They literally lived every second matters. Preach the gospel, preach the gospel, preach the gospel. Wesley was fully engaged in a life of vocational ministry, and his wife hated him.
Yeah.
And really, there's no other way to say it. I mean, hated his guts.
Yeah.
So that might be a case, John,
Yeah.
should you have gotten married?
Yeah. Or should you have been that engaged
Or exactly.
in preaching the gospel?
It's either or.
Yeah.
To make that decision, because
Yeah.
you recognize, if I'm married, I can't, I'd love to do this.
Right.
I'd love to do that. And bold ambitions for God.
Yeah.
But I mean, you are called to love your wife as Christ loved the church.
Yeah.
Who does not leave and abandon her, etc.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm going to bring it to more recent context, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Billy Graham,
Yeah.
and I know, like, there are family members that will, defend his traveling around and preaching of the gospel and all of that. And, that's fine. But the reality is it defensible in light of what Scripture says about a person who's married?
Ooh, dude, look at you going with Billy Graham is almost, sorry for the weird pun, like a sacred cow.
I know. But I think it is worth talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, he had a family, and Scripture is clear where the priority is to be.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he couldn't be a pastor. It doesn't mean he couldn't be a missionary and preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
But the question is, what was there one that was greater than the other? And I'm not going to cast judgment on that.
No, no. You're just asking, dude. No, I would say if memory serves, there were years he was gone more than 200 days.
Yeah.
That's a lot,
Yeah.
dude. I mean, when you're gone 2/3 of the year consistently, and you're not deployed, where
Yeah.
you really don't have any control. And that is a season life. That was kind of his consistent life pattern. I mean, yeah, those are things. I mean, I'd say at the very least, Ruth Bell Graham, his wife.
Yeah.
From everything I've ever read about her, I know she acknowledged it was hard.
Yeah.
She supported it. I think Graham viewed that he was given a very unique role. But no, dude. Again, if Billy Graham had been a single guy,
Right.
you wouldn't even be raising the question.
Right.
Like John Stott, whatever.
Right.
We're not raising any questions.
Yeah.
Single, so
And again, I know he was a loving husband, loving father, but I know that reading some of Franklin Graham's stuff, and regardless of what you think of him, like he was a prodigal when he was younger, and he attributes his father being away to some of that, by God's grace, he came back, restored his relationship and all of those things. But, those are questions that I think we should be asking. I don't think people should be held up as sacred.
Right.
Right. And
Agreed.
I think it's fair to look and critique and say, was this right?
Right.
And again, not necessarily in the perspective of making a judgment on him, but in looking that, because a lot of people will hold that up as an example.
Yeah.
And I would say, I don't think you should.
Right.
I don't think that should be held up as an example of what you should do if you're married and you have children, and if you are a traveling minister.
Yeah, because if you think about it, dude, you've made a commitment
Yeah.
to a person
Yeah.
that involves, what's the undergirding commitment of all the vows, to sickness and no. it's presence.
Yeah.
Your presence. That to me is the assumed commitment you're making.
Yeah.
Right? So again, what does that mean? Well, obviously you go to work. Obviously you take trips. Obviously you're not going to be there all the time, etc. But I think that's a valid point. Dude, one thing I meant to say this earlier, if I can go back to singles.
Yeah.
CFC, for instance, we don't have too many.
Yeah.
We have some.
Yeah.
Every church has singles. Some of those are never been married.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those are divorced, now single.
Yeah.
Some of those are widowed. Right? So you've got sort of subcategories within singles.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not counting teens.
Right.
Right? I'm thinking if you're in your 20s and you're single, okay.
Yeah.
Of course, because at that point you've got friends that are probably getting married or have gotten married, and you're, often the phrase "still single."
Yeah.
Which communicates a lot. Just a few words I wanted to mention to those folks. For one, if any of them listen to this podcast, like, that's an area I'd love to learn. It's been a long time since I've been single.
Yeah.
It's been over 30 years. So I recognize, I'm sure things are very different in 2024 than they were in 1993.
Yes.
I got married in August of 94. So I would welcome feedback, what it's like to live as a single person today. The other thing that I would say is, I said it, but I want to say it directly to the single person. You are not incomplete and deficient.
Yes. Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
And the reason I know that is what you mentioned earlier, Nathan, in Genesis. Mm-hmm. The idea is not, marriage as much as community. And I think, dude, think about it. This is thoroughly Trinitarian. The essence of all existence and meaning is communal.
Yeah.
Because God is love, makes sense.
Yes.
In light of the Trinitarian nature of the God we worship.
Yeah.
God has never been alone.
Yeah.
Because God is 3 in 1. So the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit aren't married.
Right.
But they are together.
Yeah.
They are in perfect communion. And I love that you said that. And that's the picture we have at the end of human history. We are not, these earthly marriages are temporary custodianships, really, that dissolve. And they become something far better.
Yep.
Right? I mean, our joy in heaven, dude, will make any joy we had here look small, puny. There's no doubt. So I just want to say to that single person, you are not deficient.
Yeah.
Your desire to be with somebody is good.
Yeah.
And to pray and to seek advice on what does it mean to kind of, how do I serve God while I'm hoping / waiting / maybe kind of believing that somebody's going to come into my life. I think those are legit questions. I did hear a pastor say this years ago. He said, you never want your church singles to think that they're like a special needs category.
Yeah.
But he used a metaphor rather like they're the special forces.
Yes.
In the church, that there are, to view this season of your life as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm listening to these two old heads, Nathan and Greg, talk on this podcast, and it does sound like marriage brings a lot of time, commitments, and allocation of space and resources, which are always limited. That I got this season where I could do things that I might not be able to do ever again.
Yeah.
Which is why often, to go back to your example earlier, dude, I will tell couples before they have kids, you want to do that? I might recommend doing that now. Yeah. Because you will find it a lot harder to do.
Yes.
When you've got, our kids, dude, were 10 years apart. So even though Samantha is well on her way to her kind of fully realized adult life, my younger Ella is just wrapping up. She just wrapped up 9th grade and is starting 10th.
Yeah.
Still a little bit more to go, right? So we got a few years. We're not unshackled. bless you, dude.
Thank you.
We're more unshackled than we were when they were little.
Yes.
Because when you're little and you want to go out for a dinner,
Yeah.
you got to get a babysitter and arrange it. Oh, no, they're sick. Oh, what do we do? And,
Yeah.
it's so much. So I would always say, this is a rare time for you.
Yeah.
And for the single person, it's a rare time for you.
Yeah.
But it's a time that could be very, very special in your life.
Yeah.
And now, but I want to stress, it's not special because you're incomplete
Right.
and deficient.
Well, and that's again the comparison I have is Joy and I are kind of in this in between, right?
Yeah.
Where we are married, obviously, almost 20 years, and we don't have children. And at this point, it looks like we won't be having children. And I can relate to that being hard.
Yeah.
Right. I can relate to the desire to want something that you don't have in that relational setting.
Yeah.
And that feeling doesn't ever go away.
Yeah.
But there are times where Joy and I look at that though, and we're able to see, as you said, man, we have a benefit with this.
Yeah.
Right? We have a benefit with this in what we can do. I mean, the amount of time and energy that we can invest in school with our students is far more than we could do if we had children.
Right.
We're both in our 40s and we are both still just late night people. I don't know anyone who is the age that Joy and I are with children
Yeah.
who are late night like that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
It's true.
there's just 9 o'clock comes and it's like, man, it's time for bed.
Yeah.
Joy and I very much are, we can still go all night if we need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are benefits, and that would be my encouragement, right? Like you said, look at this as an opportunity to say, okay, God has me in this place for this season. And depending on your age, it might just be this season, but as you said, it could be the rest of your life, right?
True.
And that can be a hard realization as well, if that's your desire.
Yep.
When Joy and I came to that realization that we are probably not going to have children, right? That's another realization you have to come to. There's the longing, and then there's the realization that, this, unless there's an act of God, unless there's some kind of miracle, it's not going to happen. Yeah,
that goes to the Stott example, right? At some point, you're waiting, and then you think, okay, Lord, all right, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And then you kind of normalize this and say, Lord, what are you laying out for us together?
Yes.
And that becomes kind of your path.
Yes.
And so, that's different for each person for different reasons. Always leaving the openness to God, like you said, dude. I'm sure Abraham and Sarah were on a well-settled path,
right?
And then God said, "Yeah, I'm going to surprise you." So, I mean, you obviously always have to leave room. God has a way of doing those things.
Yeah.
But I think that's really good, Nathan. I think to view what opportunities am I afforded? To me, this is just the natural extension of our belief in God's providence, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I haven't geeked out on that for a while, but, you take those words, you've got two Latin words there, before, and video, to see, and it's God sees before.
Yeah.
I love that little picture. In other words, he's got a plan.
Yes.
He is overseeing all of it. So if you find yourself in a spot where, I'm married but no kids, or I'm not married, okay, Lord.
Yeah.
You are more than capable of executing your perfect plan.
Yep.
So what am I called to be, do, experience in this moment?
Yes.
And I think, I love talking to single people, whether they're in their 20s or their 50s or 70s. What is happening right now, and what things are before you that you and maybe only you
Yes.
could do.
Yes. Yeah. What can you uniquely do to help further the gospel?
Yeah.
No, this has been great, man.
Yeah, it was a great way to kick it off, dude.
Yeah.
I love, you know what, dude, we always say this, but I think it's good now. Single folks listening, you know, I'd love to hear people's thoughts.
Yeah.
And maybe that's always something we can come back to.
Yep.
You know, oh, I would have liked you to address such and such. Those are the things we want to do because, you know, we're just two guys in our cool studio
That's
trying to figure things out ourselves. So anyway, it was a fun way to start August.
Yes. All right. Looking forward to the next one. Until the next time, we just rock the Casbah. Thank you again for listening to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Once again, please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you ever find yourself in the Forest Hill, Maryland area, please feel free to stop by at 135 Industry Lane, and you can get all of our service times and information at christfc.org.
These Go to 11